Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is January 14th, 2024, and let's get to the news happening. And today will be Russia. This is a very quick video, and I've made a video last week exactly talking about what was going on in Moscow, but now there's more and more of these events happening throughout Russia, and this is the utilities crisis that Russia is currently facing. And you can see here, this is from a pro-Russian Telegram channel, Rybar, indicating the amount of utility breakdowns that are ongoing throughout the country. So we've briefly talked last week on last Sunday in Moscow, some of the suburbs of Moscow having breakdowns, and even within the city center, there were some issues with power basically shutting off and then people freezing for many days. And you can see that the map has increased, and now in the grand metropolitan area of Moscow, you have all these utility breakdowns. Now it's not specified exactly which one is which, if it's power shutting off, or gas pipes bursting, or water pipes bursting, or sewage lines not working and bursting as well. So overall, this is just a grand map indicating throughout Russia, from Yakutsk, Magadan, to central Russia, to really the western parts of Russia, there's a massive crisis right now with utilities breaking down. And so obviously we know one of the main reasons why this is occurring is, of course, a lot of the men that were perhaps holding some trades jobs prior to the war have been sent to the front line in Ukraine. And obviously most of the state budget is also being allocated now towards the military, and so less is going towards repairing and maintaining infrastructure and utilities. And I'm interested to see if this massive breakdown is currently ongoing, which I have no doubt will continue to happen in the next few months throughout the winter, could be potentially a contributing factor in Russia's attitude that they currently have, that war is good, that we're winning and everything is going according to plan, and start seeing the realities of what Putin has brought to the Russians by essentially slashing the state budget and reallocating the funds towards the military and the war. But this is good news because, again, as I've mentioned last week, the Russians were extremely happy and even publicizing how last year, how Europe would freeze to death without Russian gas and Russian fossil fuels. And now they're facing, pretty much that situation that they were hoping to see in Europe and not in Russia. Another huge crisis is obviously the Russian civilian airline industry. So today, or I believe it was yesterday, could be in the last few days, there was 3 accidents that were reported in 6 hours. So this is a brand new record that was set by the Russian airline industry. So this was actually on January 12th, so a few days ago. 3 breakdowns occurred on Pobeda Airlines, and Pobeda is kind of this low-cost airline that is part of Aeroflot, so the main Russian airline. So in just less than 6 hours, an air alarm was declared in Cheboksary airport after the flight arriving from Moscow landed. The cause was a fire in the main landing gear. So the plane was towed. The second incident was flying over the Omsk region. The crew of the Moscow-Bernal flight reported failure of the right onboard inertial system. I'm not really sure what that is. The plane also signaled that it was impossible to perform an automatic landing. As a result, the aircraft landed in Novosibirsk. And the third one was pilots of the Moscow-Ufa flight reported the smell of burned wiring in the toilet while flying over Chuvashia region. The plane nevertheless landed in Ufa. So this is massive because, it's very rare to see these types of accidents outside of, Russia. The airline industry is very safe, but in Russia, evidently with the sanctions and Boeing and Airbus not providing the key parts now for maintenance, now this is what Russia is facing as well. So this has rapidly increased. In the last few months, we've been seeing and hearing more and more news about this. And obviously, as I've mentioned, this is because Russia is struggling to find the key components and parts for its Boeing and Airbus planes, as well as a shortage, most likely, of qualified technicians. It's very likely, now this is just my personal opinion, that they probably are now utilizing these technicians and these mechanics, airplane mechanics, for the military rather than the civilian industry. And also, most likely that by the end of this year in 2024, flying Russia will literally be like playing Russian roulette. You're gambling with your life at this point. So let's see what the Russians think. when we're seeing a utility crisis, food crisis as well in Russia in terms of the eggs and chicken prices going up, and also now the civilian industry, airline industry in crisis mode. What are the thoughts of the Russians in terms of this war? So this is an article that came out of the Kiev Post today, which the title mentions the Russian paradox. So 57% of the Russians now want peace. So this is a record, but 74% still support the war. And so this 74% is based on the Levada Center, which is, I think, the only independent poll that is still functional in Russia, that reported these numbers in November, where it interviewed 1,600 Russians. And so basically 74% of these Russians that were interviewed still support the actions of the Russian armed forces in Ukraine. But the Levada also indicated that 57% of Russians believe that peace negotiations should begin. What was also interesting, there was many more statistics that they brought here. More often than others, older age groups support the actions of the Russian armed forces in Ukraine. So that is 89%, so close to 90% of the respondents that were 65 years and older supported the actions of the Russian armed forces, whereas the younger age groups that were, under the age of 24, there was only 24% of support for the war. So that is an interesting statistics. Again, it's expected. The older folks usually are more patriotic, and they also are easily brainwashed as well. And they've also lived through the Soviet Union, so of course they will give more support for the war. Whereas the younger Russians, evidently, are not really interested in war, don't want to partake in it. And so it's interesting to see this divide, but it's not unexpected. And also 58% of Russians oppose another wave of mobilization. So there's a lot of numbers here. But again, this just indicates the doublethink and the paradox that the Russians currently live in. So it also proves that there's nothing to negotiate here for Ukraine right now with Russia, because the Russians evidently want their cake and ate it too. So they want a peace, but they want a peace on their own terms. That is, at the very least, taking all the territory that they're currently occupying in Ukraine and call it Russia. And, what is also unfortunate, we've talked about the divide of the older folks and the younger generation in Russia, but it's evident that most of the youth that is under 30 has either been already mobilized, or the grand majority of them have been mobilized, are currently fighting and dying in Ukraine, or many of them also left Russia and are now living in Georgia, Dubai, or elsewhere. So now the country is becoming crazier and more war hungry, because that population that supports the actions of the Russian government, stayed. And, this is just the unfortunate truth about Russia, is that to this day, the overwhelming majority of people still support the actions. But as I've said, I hope that with all these stories that I've covered today, with the breakdown of utilities throughout Russia, the civilian airline industry going in crisis mode, and also the high inflation making the Russians poorer, there will eventually, I have no doubt about it, be an implosion within Russia. It could be, many years down the line, but it will happen. There's no doubt about it. So this is the video for today, guys. This was a very quick news report about the ongoing crisis in Russia. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please subscribe and like my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!